Hello, everyone. My name is Liv, and welcome to my non Christian Bible study. I've been reading the Bible cover to cover every single day for the past 2.5 months. I've taken a decent chunk out of it so far, but still have a really fat chunk left to go. It's going to take quite some time to get through this thing. I am on page 241 of 1077, so we still have quite a bit of story left. But today, I want to talk about my overall thoughts since starting and picking up and reading this thing. I will not be going in depth to the storyline or the plot lines of each single book. I've been doing that again for the past however many days on my TikTok. So if you are interested in learning more about the story, I would head there and check out some of my videos there. They're all in a playlist, so they're all ready for you to watch. Today, though, I want to talk about just my overarching thoughts, what stories I've had deep issue with, and what I've learned. I've learned a lot since reading the Bible. It has been quite the journey, I'll say that, and a humbling journey. I thought that this would be a little bit easier than it actually was, and I was a little silly for thinking that, but that's okay. I want to talk about also why I am doing this and my thought process and why I decided to pick this thing up in this very daunting task of reading the whole thing. So we'll start with that and then work more way into my actual opinions. So why I'm doing this, and if you have been on my TikTok, I'm sorry that you're hearing this for the 17,000th time, but I wanted to argue against Christianity better. I'm a very spiritual person, but I honestly believe, and I'm sorry if this offends anyone while saying this, I think that religion is just kind of a veil to keeping a lot of people stuck in not being able to actually be liberated in this lifetime. So I think liberation and pure bliss and peace is achievable in this lifetime. And I think that religion holds most people back from actually achieving that now and keeps people focusing on the afterlife. And it gives people ulterior motives to acting certain ways, in my opinion, and also is really deeply entrenched in our society and kind of the way we think about things also. It is so embedded in most people, especially if you live in America, your entire life. And I find that really, really fascinating. So that was kind of my original why I started reading it, is I wanted to argue against it better because I like talking to people about this. And especially as you all know, I love philosophy, going back to school for it. I started reading a lot of pure philosophical texts at the beginning of the year that didn't have any notes on what they meant. It was just kind of left up for your interpretation, the actual translations of everything. And so I feel like I prepped myself at the beginning of the year without knowing I was going to do this, preparing myself to start reading this thing because interpreting it and understanding some of the words that are in the Bible and the way that they write has been difficult. And also learning Bible literacy has been also kind of hard. So when I first started reading it, I was getting very angry. I'll say that. I was genuinely very upset when I first started reading it because there's so many deeply problematic things about the Old Testament. And I'm sure if you've read the Bible or heard anything about Old Testament Yahweh or God, whatever you want to call it, you know that he, she, whatever the fuck it was, but he was ruthless and evil, in my opinion. And I think God goes through a lot of character development to finally get to the point of sending Jesus down to save everyone, if you will. But yeah, so I started reading it and I was understanding the metaphorical reasoning of why a Christian would be like, yes, this is a good story. But that honestly made me more upset because I was like, you're jumping through so many hoops to come to this conclusion that doesn't actually make that much sense. And so I would just get really pissed off. So I changed the way I was reading it to more of taking it as a story. And then after we finished the story, looking at the overarching theme of the story. But a lot of the Old Testament is cyclical, repetitive patterns that multiple people are just going through the same thing in a different font. They are learning the exact same lesson. Well, I don't know if they're really learning from it, but they have the exact same lesson, all of them, and just repetitive, a lot of repetitive. In Leviticus and Deuteronomy and Exodus, Oh my God. Like learning about the 10 commandments and then hearing them like 17 more times within the next two books was difficult to get through. So there's been times where it's like just read and just get through it as best as you can, and we can kind of look up what this was supposed to mean afterwards. And then there's times where there is some deep stuff and it causes me to think and question even my reality of life. But I never did this to like convert. I don't think I'm gonna convert to Christianity. I genuinely don't believe the resurrection was real. I don't believe in heaven and hell. Like the things that the core beliefs you need to have to be a Christian, I don't hold. But I think that most of us, especially if you live in America, we are all culturally Christian. Most of us are. And so I think I live my life similar to how a Christian lives their life, but I will not be calling myself a Christian. I do not want that title. So yeah, that I think sums up kind of why I'm doing this. And I would like to get into the first like kind of problematic little part of reading this, and that is the story of Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve, disappointing story, let me tell you. So Adam is created out of the dust of the ground by God in this perfect place called the Garden of Eden. And he tells Adam, hey, you can eat anything you want, but don't eat from the tree of knowledge. Don't do it. You will die if you do it. Don't do it. And then God creates Eve as Adam is sleeping out of his rib or out of his side. So they're in different translations, there are different words that are being used. And I think that they have incredibly different, what's the word, meanings. Because when it comes from the rib, there is a constant story I am told by Christians I talk to where it is the man is the head, the woman is the body, one can't hold the other up without the other one. So it's like you can't exist only on your own, especially to becoming one with God. Like you need your head to guide you, you need your body to keep you in line. Like the whole the whole story of it I get. But also when we look at the other translation of saying that Adam or Eve comes from Adam's side, that's more of a partnership and an equal, if you will, rather than above and below. So already, like, even if you don't see, like, even if you are refusing to see it, there's a hierarchy already in place. The man is above the woman. And I get that it's not like an evil above and below, but the small things like that genuinely like impact the way we see men and women in our society and the hierarchy that men and women hold. And there's also, and I know I sound like so fucking just shut the fuck up. Like it's a story and I get it, but it just views or it helps shape men and women's view on each other and how this like men have knowledge and logic and women are more intuitive, which I agree. But yeah, it kind of like creates those very traditional stereotypes. Maybe that's the better way to phrase that of men and women. And I just have a problem with that in general. And then we get to the point where Eve decides to eat from the tree and gets punished. Well, both of them eat from the tree, but Eve is the first one to do it. And this is the first part in the Bible where we see punishment and what punishment looks like for men versus what it looks like for women. For women, it is often more times than not, and there is several stories of women getting punished harsher or more harshly, excuse me, than men. But women, it's always something to do with like physical pain to the body. So if we actually go to the story of Adam and Eve, let me find it really quick. The fall. Yeah, and we get to the punishment. The serpent who told Eve to eat the apple was like, hey, you're not going to die if you eat this. You can eat it. You're just going to know what the gods know. And God doesn't want you to be like him. But this, quote unquote, makes people evil. And I'm just like, that messaging also is like curiosity is evil, like to a certain degree, because God is actively lying to them. Like this is If you want to call it, he wasn't lying. He was just saying they're going to die because they're not going to be immortal. We don't know that's the truth. He literally lied. And let's just take it at face value of what it is. He lied to Adam, and then the serpent was like, "You're not going to die." And they didn't die. Of course, they're no longer immortal if that's what you want to frame that as, but they didn't immediately die. But then God gets angry and he punishes them, and excuse me, let's just read her punishment. I will make your pains in childbearing very severe. With a painful labor, you will give birth to children. Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you. Another example of hierarchy. And then the man, his freaking punishment is you are cursed to the ground. Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil, you will eat food from it, and all the days of your life you will produce thorns and thistles for you, and you will eat the plants of the field. The sweat of your brow, you will eat your food until you return to the ground, since from it you were taken. For your dust you are, to the dust you will return. And so, like, for man, looking at other translations, it's more of like, okay, hard, laborious work to be able to eat well and, like, have nourishment almost for your body. And then you're going to return to the dirt because you came from the dirt, which, yeah, hell yeah, we are going to return to the dirt when we are dead. So, yeah, the disproportionate, what is it called, punishment is unfair right away, in my opinion. And if you want to disagree with that, that is yours to disagree with. But I think the story of Adam and Eve tells us a lot about how we view men and women now. I think it also kind of sets us up for how God views men and women, because a lot of, like, women in the Bible, they are only wives, they're only childbearing. Like, there's one story with I believe it's Hannah, where she thinks that her whole life is pretty much worthless because she can't have a child. And her husband is like, "Is my love not worth more than 10 children to you?" And she says no, pretty much. And she's like, "Praise the Lord." And finally she has a child. But yeah, I just think that this story sets up what we're looking at for the future. Like, this story impacts a lot of the rest of the book. And then we get to, for another example, like the flood of Noah's Ark. The wickedness in the world, that is chapter 6 in Genesis, it is very confusing because I will always bring this book up and I will never stop. The death and trial of Socrates, the trial and death of Socrates, excuse me, about how he's like, okay, well, why do we follow what the gods follow? Just because they say it's good means it's good? In whose eyes? The God's eyes? So how are we supposed to even follow that if we don't, like, we have no authority over what is good, what is bad? We just follow what the gods say is good and what the gods say is bad. But he's put to death for questioning that and having other people start to question that. And this brings me to this part of the book in Genesis, in a repeated pattern about, like, the people were evil, they were wicked, they, like, name it, that's what they were called. Like, they were evil in the eyes of the Lord. But who is to say that what these people were doing was morally wrong? Because, like, morals are completely, what is it called? Like, structured based on the society we live in. Like, they're subjective. Like, morals are completely subjective to the time that we are living within. Like, slavery used to literally be justified by many people. Even if there's people that thought it was wrong, by the majority of society, it was justifiable. So it was okay. There's a time where, like, stoning people to death was morally justifiable and subjective at that time, that it was okay to do. So that's the part that I'm like, why are we letting God only decide what is moral versus, like, the people who are living within the land? Because God puts a bunch of people on earth. He's like, no, this is not how it was supposed to go. He did not know. And he wiped them all out with a flood. He killed everyone except for Noah and his family, and only preserved that bloodline. And then more incest starts to happen because they all have children with each other. Very weird. And then we get into like the family line of Abraham. And I'm actually going to pull this picture up because I don't want to get confused here. So Terah is a boy, and he had Abraham, Nora, and Haran. And Abraham was the blessed one of the three. I can't remember the exact reason why, which is a little bit embarrassing right now. And maybe I should have written that down before we started. And maybe I should look that up right now. So, Abraham was chosen by God after God had already explained, like, the covenant of the Lord, the 10 commandments of what people are supposed to follow. Um, So Abraham was chosen by God out of those three sons because of his obedience to God. So when Noah and the whole ark thing happens, God decides to make a covenant with Noah, and all of his bloodline from here on out is going to be blessed, yada, yada, yada. But he makes a covenant of like how to act and how to serve the Lord. And so this keeps getting passed down, and Abraham is, in the eyes of the Lord, great guy, and he is chosen by God because of his dedication to the Lord and obedience to the Lord. And through Abraham, the Israelite population was born because Abraham, let me just make sure I have all of this right. Abraham had Isaac. Isaac had Jacob, who was later named Israel, and his name was changed to Israel. And God said, this is going to be the land of Israel, and all of your descendants are going to be blessed with this land. And the rest of the children of this family tree kind of become all of the enemies of the Israelites. So the weird part is when we get to the Tower of Babel, the people that are living at the time decide to build a huge tower that is like tall enough to reach the kingdom of heaven. And God's like, y'all are getting a little too powerful. And spread everyone out, changed people's languages so they couldn't understand each other, couldn't communicate with each other, so they wouldn't become as powerful, which is very strange to me. And in this time, um, people started to take place of different parts of the land. And so people were occupying the space of Israel. And so God promises Abraham's descendants to Israel, yet places some of the other descendants of his brothers in the Israel area. This leads to conflict of them trying to murder, kill, genocide, whatever you want to call it, all the other people living in the land. So it's like we get all these descendants that are blessed, all this stuff. They become enslaved later on, which is a whole nother story. The story of Moses. It's a little frustrating, but Jacob's brothers sell him off to the Egyptians to be a slave in Egypt. And while he is there, God like puts his hand on him and makes him divinely blessed and able to read dreams and have them come true and like be able to interpret dreams of what they actually mean, all this stuff. So he eventually becomes like leader and king of Egypt. And after him, way, way, way down the line, Moses is born. But this is after the people, the Hebrew people of Egypt, were enslaved by the Egyptians, which is like a whole complicated story. And I'm sorry if that didn't make a lot of sense, but I'm just trying to give the background without getting too much in the nitty gritty because I will talk forever about it. So finally, Moses was born. He was born as a Hebrew, obviously, but his mom, they made a rule for all the Hebrews living in Egypt that they could only have any firstborn son had to be killed pretty much. And so the mom puts Moses into the river to pretty much send him off to his death. But he floats up to the actual Pharaoh's, um, I think it's his sister or his daughter, floats up to her feet and she takes him in and raises him as he's about to be in line for the Pharaoh spot. He is an Egyptian in his eyes. He doesn't know that he's Hebrew. He has only been raised as Egyptian. He finds out he is a Hebrew and runs off because he accidentally kills one of the Egyptian people who was watching over the slaves of the Hebrews and beating an old Hebrew man. So he accidentally kills this Egyptian kind of guard, I guess you would call it. And he runs off because he's like, fuck, I just killed someone. And in that time, he finds this place filled with Hebrew people. He becomes a shepherd. And then he finds this burning bush, talks to God. God's like, you're going to take these people out of the hands of the Egyptians. Go back. I will give you power. There are, how many plagues are there? 9 plagues? 12 plagues? Something like that. There's a bunch of plagues that come down on all the people of Egypt. And while Moses is trying to take these people out of Egypt. But the Lord keeps hardening the Pharaoh's heart. So Moses goes back to Egypt and he's like, hey, release my people, please. But the Lord, directly in the stories, it constantly says, the Lord hardened the Pharaoh's heart. And so the punishments get worse, get worse, get worse. The very last plague is the plague of the firstborns. So God sends this evil spirit down into the village that kills all of the Egyptian firstborns, the male firstborns. So the Pharaoh's son, his first son, his actual son, dies. And in that moment, because there's also a plague of darkness too going on, so there's no light, all the Hebrew people escape. They start walking on foot. Out of Egypt they go with damn near no food, no water, and not really any route. They're just following Moses. And after doing some research on all of this, it's like 2.2 million people that go out of Egypt. That is a fuck ton of people. And after the Pharaoh realizes that all these people are gone, he says, we got to go get our workers. Let's go. Saddles up a lot of men on chariots and heads down to find them. And this is where they are meeting at the Red Sea. So the people have walked all the way to the Red Sea, and now they're backed up against the sea and the Egyptians. Moses sticks his staff into the ground, and the sea splits in half. They walk through the sea, and the Pharaoh and all of his people, the Egyptians, get swallowed up by the sea. So, very interesting story. But God leads these people out into the wilderness where, again, they don't have a lot of food, they don't have a lot of water. Poor planning a little bit. God finds a way to get around this, and he starts raining manna, which is bread from the sky, and he allows Moses to have the power to crack open a rock and make water gush out of it. But the people of the Hebrew people are like, yo, why did you bring us out of Israel? Like, why did you take us out of Egypt? We were kind of fine there. We had shelter. We had food coming in. Like, now you just brought us out to the wilderness where we don't really know what the fuck's going on right here. And we don't know who this God is. Like, we know the God of Israel, but we also don't know the God of Israel. And he just brought us into more suffering. So God, take us out of this suffering. And it's this cyclical pattern of into suffering, out of suffering, into suffering, out of suffering, and then killing everyone who disobeys God's commands. But also God is like not making his commands known enough. Like, it's just frustrating because the story of Moses too, like Moses is so devout to God, like marches up Mount Sinai twice, writes down on stone tablets the 10 commandments and all of the rules of God, and is leading these people into the land of Israel just to die before getting to the land of Israel, because one of his fatal mistakes at the end of his life is he brought more water out of a rock but claimed that he did it himself, not God. Oh no. So God directly tells him, you're not making it into Israel. Sorry, buddy. You're going to die up here on this mountain. I'm so sorry, but no Israel for you. So he was promised Israel. Like, might I mind you, like, he was like, your people will travel to the promised land. Like, you will get there. He doesn't get there. The power's passed on to Joshua, and from here, when they finally get into Israel, slaughter mania happens. It's so intense. You see all these blue tabs? That is because God commanded these deaths to happen. He allowed these deaths to happen or committed them himself. There is multiple times where God is in the Bible, just like infecting people with tumors, infecting people with like the whatever they're called on your face, like the boils on their body, like constantly. Anytime someone is not obedient to God, boom, death, boom to the sword. And there are also multiple examples of God directly telling them to kill children. And then we get into like all the rules that like the divine rules about like offerings and who you can and can't sleep with, all this stuff. Daughter and father is not included of people you can't sleep with. Hmm. That's a little scary. Also, women on women is not prohibited in the Bible, but it is unfortunately prohibited man and man in the Bible. Male shall not sleep with other male. So take with that what you will, but yeah, kind of interesting. So a lot of the rules are just like, come the fuck. Like, obviously, this is a long time ago, but come the fuck on. Like, this is not going to stand the test of time. And so that was another argument I had of God not being all knowing. He is not all knowing, not all powerful, and not all loving. He is not an omnipotent God. He is a God who doesn't understand pattern recognition and has a very hard time revealing himself to people who don't know him. And that is a huge problem I have within the Bible is God refusing to show himself to the losing team. It's only showing himself in ways that make them be or that are killing them. So, for example, like in Samuel 1 or 1 Samuel, excuse me, the Philistines capture the Ark of the Lord, and in the 7 months that they captured the Ark of the Lord and had them in their town, all of the towns of the Philistines are pretty much infected with tumors, and women, children alike are all being killed. Even their livestock are being killed. And so it's like they know God is real because God's infecting them all with tumors, all this stuff. He doesn't make himself known though in a let me save you and be your king and God. So I have a really, really big problem with that because it's like, huh? Like you're only picking and choosing who you want to be like your chosen ones. And I just don't like that. And I don't like that it's just so there's like free will doesn't exist. Like people are like, well, God gave Adam and Eve free will, so that's why people are evil in the Old Testament. But no, people can't even act out. They can't even question God. They can't even walk towards the. There's a point where people look at the ark of the Lord and burn because they didn't correctly approach it. Two of the like priests' kids, and I forget if it was Leviticus or Deuteronomy, walk towards the what did they build? They built a oh my god, I'm losing my train of thought. Sorry, hang on. What did they build? The huge like tent thing for God to stay in and hang out in. Hold on, let me find it. Tabernacle. There we go. The tabernacle. There's a point where two priests enter the tabernacle with little not incest, my bad. Incense things that have fire coming out of them, and God freaking gobbles them up with fire because they didn't enter correctly. There's a moment where people are like, why does Moses get to be the leader? Why do you guys all like get divine questioning and like talking to God? Like that's not fair. The floor opens up and eats them whole, them and their families and all their possessions. And then there's a fire that breaks out that God started with the other people that were trying to rise up against Moses. Like there's so many times where it's like you didn't have a choice with free will. Like that didn't exist because all these evil people, they are getting killed. They are not getting free will to just do whatever the fuck they want. This is like the free will is like, okay, consequence death. Like you don't really have a choice against free will. You have like fear and obedience or fear and death. Like that's kind of all. And so I've had like a really hard time with understanding the justifications and again the mental gymnastics that people are going through to fully justify God's wickedness and evil in the Old Testament. And an essay that I am trying to write, which hopefully I get to write this in college for my religion class, is goes through character development. Like, I'm kind of dead set on that, especially with Jesus, because the God in the Old Testament versus what Jesus was preaching is very different, and is also like, if he is the Son of God, the actions of God in the Old Testament unfortunately do matter with moving into the New Testament. Like, you can't just ignore one and have the other. You have to look at both of them. And so I've been thinking really deeply about this recently, of just like, I don't understand why Jesus can't just be called a philosopher and we just have Jesus's teachings in a book. That's all we need. We don't need the entire story attached, because the entire story that is being attached is showing how to set societal structures up to have hierarchy and how to put God above all. I just also find a lot of problems with what is it called? Like, worship. I don't think we should be worshiping stuff in general. Because that kind of like places us below the thing we're worshiping. And I personally believe like God is very accessible for everyone. You can just like tap into your magical powers of like talking to God and like hanging out with God and like being a magical being. But I think God is more of like, I've said this so many times, like an entity, a light, a force. It's not this thing we worship. It's not this heavenly father in the sky who is better than us in all regards, because this is proving he's not better than us. Like, that's my like biggest thing. And I'm like, I don't want to worship a God who is just willy-nilly killing people, even if these are the first people to exist. You have to also understand that they're stupid. Judges, the whole book of Judges is proving that these are stupid people. They keep losing God. They keep doing evil in the eyes of the Lord because they're like losing God in their community. But the message and the covenant that the Lord made with Moses, and the 10 commandments and the tablets of all the rules of offerings and all this stuff that he made, he hasn't performed a like magical cool event, I'll say that, for the new followers, I guess the Israelites of the Lord. So it's like when they made it out of Egypt also, it was 2 generations down that finally made it into, that actually got to go into the promised land. Most of the people that were came out of Egypt were killed by God. Like, it's insane. Like, they would just shut people out for like being unclean. Like, there's so many things. Like, it's just freaking insane. Like, the rules are insane. And so to justify that is hard, and to listen to people trying to justify it is very difficult. And I just don't think that we should be worshiping something that was kind of looking for trouble, if you will, kind of looking for any way to punish people. Because again, with the, he hasn't done anything like extravagant, like parting the Red Sea for these people to understand the power of God. They're just winning battles against like the other people within the Israel area. Like, he delivered the Amalekites into the Israelites' hands. Like, that's that's the work of God. Like, that's what God does in the Old Testament, and that's how he shows like how powerful he is. But like the early Old Testament, he's doing these great wonders and magical things, but doesn't show himself to the losing team. Doesn't show himself to the people who are like, should we actually believe in this? Like, why should we believe it? Like, there's so many problems with the way that God chooses to show up. And that's kind of like my biggest issue, I think, with Old Testament, is just picking and choosing and picking and choosing, and these repetitive cycles where these people obviously aren't learning, and God not having pattern recognition enough to change the way he's approaching it is frustrating. Like, it genuinely is angering. And that's why I switched to reading it as a story, because like I can follow it better as a plot line and not trying to work with the metaphorical reasoning behind why, like the Book of Ruth, for example. That book also pissed me. I had so many people be like, "You're going to love the Book of Ruth. The Book of Ruth is so beautiful." It's this girl who leaves everything behind to follow her mother-in-law to Israel to now worship her God. She's leaving her family, her gods behind, like everything she has behind, to go to Israel and marry this man because they want to keep property in the bloodline. It's just so cult adjacent, and how to show your dedication and how it takes leaving people to be able to prove how dedicated and obedient you are to God, and leaving those hard things behind, when just like, come on, like, why can't everyone just be happy and coexisting in space and time? So it's just, yeah. And also, these people, let me just say it again, they're stupid. They're not understanding the lessons they're supposed to be learning. And with that, they keep making the same mistakes. So it's like so repetitive. And I'm just excited for Jesus to get into the story. But we still have, I think, 500 more pages before that happens. So we got some time before any of that starts to come into play. But yeah, it's definitely made me realize that, like, the Old Testament and New Testament is a story to cope with not understanding how God works. Not cope. I shouldn't say that word. That's rude. The Old Testament and New Testament is just a story to tell behind why Jesus is here. And I think that Jesus is an important character and person that we can all learn a lot from. I'm not taking that away from anyone, and I literally agree, especially like rating some of the things, but also some of the things are not adaptable to the time we're living in. And I think we see this within like new gen Christians, where it's more of the relationship with God than actually following the religion, which I agree with, and I'm happy people are getting away from religion. But that following and having a relationship with God is so hierarchy oriented and so like not Puritan, but very strict with the things you have to do to be able to be close to God. Like, one thing I see often on social media that I have a really big problem with is like this idea of cutting people out all the ways. If they're not good for you, cut them out. Like, they're not benefiting you in any way, cut them out. Which, like, yeah, if you have a fucking shitty friend, get them out of your life. You don't need that. But also at the same time, that doesn't mean leave friends who are there to support you because you have to go follow God just because they like to go out on the weekends. You just don't have to go out. Like, if that's like the only thing you guys have in common, again, it's fine to cut friends out that you don't have anything in common with. But I see this message push that like you have to spend time alone to know God, which to a certain extent, yes, you got to know yourself to know God. But that doesn't mean all your time has to be spent alone. That doesn't mean your duty in this world is to just work on being the best husband, work on being the best future wife. Like, I see a lot of content that really pushes like getting into my soft feminine era so I can find the perfect man and become his rib. And there's another guy on Instagram that pisses me off. He's like a fitness creator. And he was like searching for my, or how can I expect to find my missing rib if I don't make room for her? Like, just constant talk about the Bible, but like also just having a relationship with, it's just confusing. And I hope that one day we can get to a point where like spirituality is enough and just being in alignment with yourself is enough and religion is not needed, because like this creates this what is the word I'm looking for? Like, this creates more problems than it solves, in my opinion. And I get it when people say, well, Christianity is the oldest religion in the world, which is also not true. But like, it stood the test of time because it's the most peaceful religion to exist, which I don't disagree, but I don't agree. I don't think it's kept us from being violent, but I do agree that it does create some of the most peaceful people. And that's why I just advocate so heavily for make Jesus a philosopher and that's all. Like, the story of the resurrection is too polarizing. Teach his teachings. That's all we need to talk about. Like, it doesn't have to be this heavenly father that's looking down on you all the time. I get that that's comforting for people, but also it's really comforting to think that just God's a magical force you can work with. And this is me where I'm trying to convince you to believe my world beliefs, so I need to stop because I'm really trying to not do that too much anymore. And I'm working on not doing that too much anymore. But yeah, I hope all of my thoughts were coherent enough for this video. I tried to make a script today and it just was not working. Not working. I want to figure out a way to like be able to make a script and talk from a script and film everything from that because I feel like it would allow me to stay a bit more organized. But yeah, if y'all want more of a story deep dive on any of the stories that I have problems with, let me know. If not, I will get back to you guys in about 2 weeks with another review of just like kind of my thoughts and opinions and maybe if anything has shifted. I will continue to have conversation with religious people because I've been learning a lot and yeah, I've learned a lot. My some of my best friends are very very religious and hearing their point of view, I'm like, girl, we agree. Like it's just like yeah, religion is just an identity thing that I feel like people have to put on themselves to feel better about believing in God sometimes. So, yeah, lots of opinions, lots of thoughts. I'm excited to talk more about it and get more into this. I thought I was going to be able to film with my camera today, guys, but my freaking batteries are all dead and my chargers won't work. So, I got to go get some more batteries for my camera because it's not going to work. So, higher quality video coming soon, which is really awesome. And we have a mic, so better sound quality, which is also awesome. But yeah, TTYL. I hope you enjoyed this. Leave a like, subscribe if you are not already subscribed. Love you so much. And I'll talk to you soon. We have an interesting thing to talk about next week or next time we talk because I'm reading The Sacred Mushroom in the Cross right now. Very interesting. I have so many thoughts about it and I can't wait to share them with you. But I want to get more through the book before I share any thoughts. So, yeah, love you guys. Bye.